first thing is mindset. As if you don't have that, thoughts create what you perceive to be possible is where you'll be. Then there's really three different things, and it falls under the pillar of what you eat. And I've got a very specific mantra for each to make it simple. The second pillar is how you move, and the third pillar is how you recover.
JJ Virgin is a triple board certified nutrition expert and fitness Hall of Famer. JJ is a passionate advocate of the healing power of nutrition and is mission-driven to change the way the world sees aging and longevity. She has launched 3 multi-million-dollar businesses and is a prominent TV media personality who's made numerous appearances on PBS, Dr. Oz, Rachael Ray, Access Hollywood, and The Today Show. JJ is the author of 4 New York Times bestsellers, and her most recent book, Warrior Mom: 7 Secrets to Bold, Brave Resilience, shares the inspirational lessons JJ learned as she fought for her son's life. As an authority on transformational leadership, she has coached some of the biggest names in health and transformed the lives of millions around the world. Welcome back to Take Back Your Health with Dr. Amy Myers. Today's guest is JJ Virgin. I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome, JJ.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad that you are doing this podcast.
Oh, me too. So thanks for all your mentorship over the years and, helping light a fire under me to get myself back out there. Excited to have you as one of my somewhat new first guests. So let's see. You are about to turn 60 wonderful. And my God, you look better than most 40 wonderful people. So congratulations to you. And let's talk about that and how you are really trying to set the world ablaze with what we want to call about powerful aging.
Yes, I know, because when you think about it, where powerful aging came from, Amy, is everyone talks about aging gracefully. And you see these people and I go, I don't want to do that. I don't want to dress age appropriately. I don't want to not be able to do things. I don't want to age gracefully. Forget aging gracefully, And then when you really look at what happens as we age, and I'm always looking for how do we major in the majors? I feel like in a lot of the health circles, especially in a lot of the influencers, they're majoring in the minors. And whatever that minor thing is at the time. And I'm like going, well, that's all good. Like you can red light, cold plunge, all that. I love all that stuff. But if you're not sleeping well, or you're not eating enough protein, or you're not moving, like that red light is not saving you. So let's major in the majors. And when you really look at what happens as we age, the biggest thing that happens as we age, they talk about losing muscle, we lose strength, but we really lose power. And that is because we have a type of muscle fiber called your type 2 muscle fibers that we start to lose, your fast twitch muscle fibers. And so we don't have to, is the cool thing. Like none of this has to happen. And so that's really the idea behind powerful aging, is what do we need to do to keep that power? And I would argue to actually show up more powerfully, because if, as I started to talk about this and putting on muscle and taking creatine, I kept getting pushback of, I don't want to get big. And I'm like, you know what? At first I was like, oh, you're not going to get accidental muscle. And then I thought, you know what? It's time to get big. It's time to make a ruckus. It's time to get powerful. If you're not going to do it now, when the heck are you going to do it? What? At 90?
I know. And look at your muscles. I mean, your arms are to die for. So tell us about this fast twitch muscle fiber. I mean, we're losing this. Do you know, like at what rate as we age? When does it start going down? And how can we not only preserve it, but actually, is there a way to build more of it?
Yes, 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 and yes, which is the exciting. Because if there was nothing we could do about this, I'd be like, hey, we'll go age gracefully over there. That's not the case at all. And that's what's really exciting. So this all starts to happen at age 30 and starts to get worse. But here's why. In our teens, in our 20s, we build muscle through a lot of hormonal responses. This starts to shift around age 30 and really starts to shift around age 40 and into menopause for women, because a lot of things happen. I don't need to probably tell this audience, a lot of things happen with menopause that start to make things go sideways. Like we get more of what's called anabolic resistance. It's harder for us to uptake our essential amino acids and build muscle. Our metabolism goes down because of the drop in estrogen. But all of these things, while they can happen, they don't have to happen. Like the stats are starting at age 30, we lose 3 to 8% of our muscle mass a decade. Starting at age 40, it goes up to 1% of muscle, 2 to 4% of strength, 6 to 8% of power. And then starting at age 60, it doubles. But the point is, none of it has to be. When I was doing my PhD, I was doing it in the exercise physiology department at the University of Southern California, but it was gerontology focused. And I saw master athletes in their 80s and 90s that could kick my butt, right? And then I would train people down at Gold's Gym in Venice. And there were literally women in their 70s who I was like, I wish I had that body. So I saw what was possible and I didn't let myself, it was kind of a way to save myself from falling into this narrative that we're hearing that everything's going to decline. It will if you don't use it. And the thing that happens as we age is we have to do more. You know, the more you do, the more you can do. And the less you do, the less you can do. And you hear about people who are aging out of their houses and they need to get a house that's one level. And I'm thinking, you need a 3-story house. You need your kitchen on the top floor, your bathroom on the bottom floor, you know, and you have to go up and down all day long. The last thing you need to do is do less. We need to do more. And there just was a study that came out that looked at, can we build muscle as we age, specifically fast twitch? And it showed that we could. So this is all possible. You just have to do the right things.
Well, let's walk through those. So besides using it, you know, that's probably maintaining it at best, or perhaps not losing it, like the statistics that you just said. But how do we actually gain it or produce more of these fibers?
There's 3 things, 3 big pillars, but there's an underlying piece to all of this, of course, that I got from our buddy, Dr. Mark Hyman, who, and this kind of kicked off everything. He told me this when I was 59. He goes, you know, people who are positive about aging live 7.5 years longer than people who don't. And I'd realized that I had big goals for when I was turning 50, but I'd never done it for 60. And so I was just kind of paying attention to the zeitgeist and going, oh, like nothing exciting happens after this point. And then I went, wait a minute, stop it. And so I took that idea and I went, all right, I'm going to start looking for models of what is possible, like the Dolly Parton in the Dallas cheerleaders outfit, you know, singing. I'm going to look for those possibilities instead of the alternative. And so first thing is mindset. As if you don't have that, you know, thoughts create what you perceive to be possible is where you'll be. Then there's really 3 different things, and it falls under the pillar of what you eat. And I've got a very specific mantra for each to make it simple. The second pillar is how you move. And the third pillar is how you recover. Basically, I say eat protein first, lift heavy things, sleep through the night. However, there's more to it. But those are the biggest rocks. Again, as we age, couple things happen. We have this phenomenon called anabolic resistance, where it is more difficult for us to build muscle, both because we have trouble triggering something called muscle protein synthesis. That's how we rebuild. And we also, we have trouble triggering that from what we're eating and from how we're lifting. So we know that as we age, we need more protein, not less. And also our ability to digest and assimilate it likely goes down too. So I teach people to eat protein first, because what I hear from people is, oh, I can't eat all that protein. I get too full. I'm like, great, eat it first. Then you've covered your bases. Like I watch people sit down and eat their appetizer, their salad, which is a sundae they've put on the raspberry vinaigrette and the glazed nuts and the dried fruit and the cheese. And, you know, they had 5 calories of arugula and a couple 100 calories of fat and carbs. And then they get to their protein and they're like, I'm full. I'm like, okay, so we'll skip all that. Just start with the protein. And then you'll eat your non-starchy vegetables, a little bit of healthy fat. So the first thing is eat protein first and eat about 1 gram per pound of target body weight. And get that into your likely 3 meals a day, hard to do in 2. And I always say diets are tools. If you're trying to build muscle, most likely. And if you're not trying to build muscle, I'm going to encourage you that you want to build muscle. Muscle for me, when we think of it, I would look at it like a really good 401k with a well-performing stock, right? You want to be thinking about how much muscle can I put on how much can I put on? How strong can I get? How powerful can I get? So that when I do start to lose it, I will have a way bigger savings account. When I do want to retire and dig into my savings account, I'll have way better interest and money I can live off of. Same thing with muscle. So first part is eating protein first, eating 1 gram per pound of target body weight, and then adding to that creatine. Have you been doing creatine, by the way?
Me, I have after listening to you. I certainly have.
I'm obsessed. I'm actually working on a special formula. I've learned some new stuff. I'm not going to spill the beans on it yet, but the information on creatine is so amazing for menopausal women in their mood, bones, muscle, skin. I'm like, holy smokes. It's like the more you dig into it, you go, wow, this is crazy. So protein, creatine on the one side, and I'm just giving high overviews here. On the movement side, I actually have a way I step people into this, because what I see in movement is that, when you look at your metabolic rate, you've got how many calories you'd burn at rest, which is dictated by your age, sex, genetics, muscle mass. Then you have the other 2 ways that you burn calories, thermic effect of food, of which protein is way higher than fat or carbs. Then you have, and that's like, 10% of your overall calories, your resting metabolic rate, maybe 50, 60%. The rest is activity. But activity is both exercise and non-exercise. And in the reality is the most modifiable one, likely, is really honing in and making sure that you're moving enough all throughout the day. Mm-hmm. And that's where trackers are great. So I start there first of let's just look at how much you're actually moving each day. Are you getting in that recommended 8,000 to 12,000 steps a day? And I like to work on one thing at a time. I am obsessive about the step thing. And now once you get used to it, you know what you need to do and it's just a thing. But that's always step one is, are you getting that in every single day? And ideally, one of those walks is after your evening meal to help with digestion and lowering blood sugar. Once you're nailing that, then you take 3 times a week. And there was a great study that looked at 12,000 steps a day, and they had a control group that did nothing. And then they had 12,000 steps and then 12,000 steps with 3 times a week adding intensity. And that intensity, same amount of basically effort, 12,000 steps. But the people who put the intensity in for 30 minutes 3 times a week improved their body composition more, lost more waist circumference. So, it makes sense. That's the next step is let's throw on a rucking vest, a little weighted vest. Let's add some hills. Let's add some speed 3 days a week for 30 minutes. It turns out that if you put that foundation in place, you actually will get better results from a resistance training program. Yeah, I used to sit there with my head and go, yeah, but resistance training is so important. But then I thought, what's most important is that you're able to lay a foundation so that you can build on a resistance training program and not get hurt.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Before I really got fit, that was always a problem for me. It was like I would do this 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or almost like
fired up.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And, it's so funny with the steps. I of course track everything, and it's like, I have a 1-story house. So just walking around my house, generally, I at least get the 10,000 steps. And then when I fly to Austin and go, to my office, it's like screeching halt. So I bought, a treadmill desk that as we're sitting everyone else is sitting, I'm walking because, it would just literally be all these steps to a week in Austin and very little steps.
Well, you did perfect because you troubleshooted the situation. These walking pads are amazing. I'm here with a stand-up desk. I've got a walking pad right next to me so that I can make sure, I'll look at it and go, oh, this is like a day. I don't do it when I'm podcasting because it's noisy.
Yeah.
But although I've seen some of the guys do it, I'm like, this is distracting. But I'll look at my day and go, all right, you're doing those meetings on the walking desk or you're going outside on the walking pad. So that's the first step. But then the next step is to get that resistance training in. And just like you said, what I find people get really fired up. And then the next thing you know, they're injured because they didn't lay the foundation. And the reality is you want to train whether it's at your home or at the gym, to get better at navigating life so you don't break the hip, so you don't have the injuries. And so you want to build a great foundation. And what I have people do for the first 8 weeks of a resistance training program, so much of it is just teaching your nerves and muscles how to talk to each other and making sure that you're moving well and doing things that are super functional. I blew out my knee when I was 17 trying to do point ballet, which as a 6 foot tall woman is someone should have stopped that. I did gymnastics and point ballet. And I'm like, why didn't someone say, play some basketball, girl? But I did those, blew out my knee, and I've had knee issues ever since that. Now I've created knee, back, hip, other knee, but I've been managed to do so much because I kept myself so strong. And I say that because I often find that people will say, oh, I can't do this because of my knee or my back or my shoulder. And I say, that's actually why you need to do this.
Absolutely. I have a degenerative hip and have been told eventually I'll need a hip replacement. But luckily, my ortho said, just get stronger, get your buttocks, and as I have spent so much time getting stronger, I mean, it's really only an occasion that I've gone to the water park with my 7-year-old or something that, I'll get when I do something really unusual. And I generally don't do those things. But, when I don't listen to myself and I do something, then I end up in a situation. But yeah, I mean, strength is, as you said, what you need to keep those muscles strong and tight to, support joints.
Support the joints. And, we talk so much about bone density and osteoporosis, but to me, osteoporosis, having weak, fragile bones, is very similar to having high blood sugar. They are lagging indicators of a problem. By the time you got osteoporosis, you have not been using your muscles like you needed to be using them. Probably you didn't have enough vitamin D and estrogen and the rest of those things as well, but it's a lagging indicator. You fix your muscles, you'll have great bones. So that next step is to do resistance training, but really to do it in a functional way. I love things like I divide the body into 4 parts and I focus on 3. And one of them is hip and thigh hinging. So things like a squat or a deadlift, because you do these things in life. In life, we have to squat. So you might say, oh, I've got bad back or bad knees. I'm like, well, that's even more of a reason to work on these, because you're going to be doing this in life and then you're really going to hurt yourself. Mm-hmm. So squats or step ups, things that really help with leg power as well, which we'll talk about how you can focus more on that. And then upper body pulling would be things like a pull up. I love to start with assisted, but now I've gotten myself up to being able to do 4 to 5 sets of 6 to 8. Yep.
Wow. Congratulations.
I just got fired. I was like, I can do this. Come on. Pull-ups, bent over rows, again, picking something up off the floor, very functional. And then push-ups and dips, pushing yourself out of a chair. And there's some great research on push-ups. Like if you look at a couple of the things that are very indicative of lifespan and health span, it's VO2 max, which is how much oxygen you're going to use when you're doing all-out exercise, and push-ups or a grip strength test. And push-ups are a great proxy for overall body strength, and so is grip strength. And so we know that, these are actually bigger indicators. Like VO2 max of anything that we do, any lab test, anything, this is the single biggest predictor of overall health and longevity, VO2 max. So push-ups, dips, things that we would have to do in life, push something away, put an overhead press, put something in the overhead compartment on a plane, dip, push yourself out of a chair. And then I also have core in there, but I don't actually have people focus too much on core, because if you're doing push-ups and you're doing bent over rows and you're doing squats, you better be using your core.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, 1 gram of protein per ideal body weight. I'm seeing all over, Instagram and other places, at least 30 grams of protein at every meal. I believe you're a proponent of intermittent fasting, but you mentioned, that this is a lot of protein, trying to get it over 3 meals. So can you just kind of talk to us about all of those things? How does somebody get that amount in? How about intermittent fasting? And if you are doing that, maybe you're only eating 2 meals.
Let's unpack a couple things. First of all, the actual protein, because The challenge with protein is all protein's not created equal. And there's a big difference from sitting down and eating, say, a chicken breast or Greek style yogurt versus having, say, some quinoa. And so what we're looking for when we're eating protein is just like when we eat carbs and fat, we're doing them for fuel, but also when we're eating the fat, we're getting those essential fatty acids. On the protein side, what we're getting out of the protein are those essential amino acids. In carbs and fat, we actually have a storage place for all of this. With protein, there is no storage place. If you don't have it, you're going to have to start to break down tissue, which you don't want to do. So we need it every single day, and we need the 9 essentials that our body will make the other 11 out of. So we need the essential amino acids every day. Plant proteins don't have the same type of bioavailability and digestibility that animal protein has. So quite often with plant protein, you have the fiber in there and you don't have the same balance of amino acids. You know, they always say it has the amino acids to rebuild a plant, not the amino acids to rebuild a person, right? So I say this because if you're more on the plant-based, 40 grams of protein is probably going to be a better choice. And the fiber can also cause some issues in there versus the 30 grams. However, I have something that I put with this to solve that problem as well. And I honestly think, I'm surprised it's not more standard. I think that every woman 50 plus should be on creatine and should be on essential amino acids.
I was just going to ask you about that. Yeah.
As I'm unpacking this literature and looking through the research on essential amino acids, I'm like, first of all, how did branched chain amino acids ever become a thing? Because they make no sense. And why aren't we using essential amino acids in the 50 plus population, at least in your first meal of the day, but ideally in your first and last meal of the day, just so we make sure we really have what you need. And we know that if you are, let's say, coming through surgery, it was one of the first things when my son got hit that I did was put him on essential amino acid. You know, if you're coming out of a surgery and healing, if you're in caloric restriction, trying to lose fat, if you're lifting heavy, that you're going to have higher demands for this as well. So it's kind of an insurance policy to make sure that you get what you need. So I think essential amino acids can be a huge help there. So that's the protein side of it.
With the essential amino acids, it doesn't really tell you like how much protein you're getting, I guess, because it's in the form of an amino acid. So do you have any type of conversion that if you're taking a scoop of, whatever brand essential amino acids, that's adding X number of grams of protein for you?
It's not actually. And so that's the reason you don't see it as protein grams, because it's not adding protein, it's adding essential amino acids from the protein. So I don't even think of it like that. What I would say is go for your 30 or 40. I think women really should be more like 40, and then add the essential amino acids with it. I think we need both. Now all of this depends on the quality. Like it's way different if you don't have, a whey intolerance. I find a lot of people can tolerate whey isolate that can't tolerate, say, a Greek style yogurt, or some people can tolerate Greek. So it depends on your piece. But let's say you're doing a bone broth shake. You really need those essential amino acids because you're not getting complete. You're getting 80% of a bone broth shake's collagen, and collagen's just going to be 3 essential aminos. You're not getting what you need. So I would hit double the essential amino acids there. So it's kind of learning now how to put the 30 to 40 grams together, 40 plant, 30 animal. And even with that, I'd say I'd rather go a little higher, because if someone is looking to put on muscle or lose fat, and I would guess that's the majority of the audience. I mean, reality, right? And most people want to do both. Then you're better to err a little higher and have those essential amino acids in place. It's just like we eat dietary fat, yet we take fish oil. So we make sure that we get those essential omega-3s in place, right?
Right. Yeah.
So if you look at diets as tools, whether it's, carnivore, keto, plant-based, intermittent fasting, you always look at, why am I doing this thing? I think Sachin Panda is like so amazing with his work, all the circadian code, all of the stuff around the clock. And, I think the biggest challenge we have with intermittent fasting is it can mean anything. It could mean eating, within a 12-hour window, which I think is how we should be eating, and that's not intermittent fasting, that's normal eating. Mm-hmm. Could be eating, during an 8-hour window, 6-hour window, 1 meal a day. So I always break it down to what are we looking to do? And I think for the majority of us, if we stop eating 2 to 4 hours before bed, and later is better, like or longer is better, like 3 to 4 hours, and we start eating about 2 hours after we wake up in the morning, we're probably in a perfect window. And that will take you to about 10 hours of eating a day, maybe 9. And I find within that window, it's easy to get 3 meals in. Like, why are we doing intermittent fasting? And I think the majority of people probably are doing intermittent fasting to lose weight. And if they're doing it to lose weight, the research doesn't show that it's any different than just caloric restriction, that it's probably just another way of caloric restriction.
Yeah.
Which so many of these things are.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, as you know, waste removal, repair, cellular repair. So I do think that there are people doing it for those reasons as well.
Right.
Or maybe doing it more for those reasons than the weight loss.
So here's the question that I cannot get an answer to. And I think it's because there's not an answer. First of all, autophagy is not an on-off switch. And like some of the best ways to trigger autophagy are exercise. Like every time I look at anything, I'm like, it's exercise, it's exercise, it's exercise. And then there's like research on, okay, intermittent fasting improves stem cell production, it triggers autophagy. And I'm like, okay, but what amount? Would it vary with someone if they're more metabolically healthy? Like who knows what the window is? And when someone says it takes like X amount of hours to trigger autophagy, how are they actually measuring it? What biomarker are they looking at? Because there really isn't any easy way to tell this.
Right.
So I think it's really, really helpful to restrict your eating to, normal circadian rhythm and not snack and not eat after bed and give your body a little time to wake up in the morning, pancreas wake up, et cetera. I think you're way better off. If you're going to shrink your window further than that, I know it's harder to do it this way, but I think we're better off shrinking it to early than late. Like I'd rather see someone say intermittent fast from 10 to 4 than from, 12 or 2 to 8.
I just find it harder. When I wake up and I don't eat, like I feel fine. But once I've eaten, it's hard, like I can't sleep if I'm hungry. So,
right.
I don't know if that's if other people feel the same or not, but I personally find intermittent fasting, again, I haven't tried it too much doing what you're doing. And a lot of people have said that, but my natural thing is to, stop eating by 7 and then to fast in the morning. It seems to be much easier for me.
To me, all of these things are what works best for you. All these things are tools. And is it helping you with whatever your goals are? So for me, like going to the gym fasted, I found that my ability to work out hard went down by about 30%. And since volume is the single biggest stimulus, right? Like it's going to be that volume for hypertrophy, I went, well, that's not helping me much.
Right.
And so in the quest for how do I continue to build muscle 60, 70, 80, fasted workouts weren't working. And I think that the big argument with fasted workouts is you burn more fat. But the challenge is you may burn more fat during the workout, although if you're doing an intense workout, you actually don't want to be having your primary fuel be fat. It should be glycogen and creatine phosphate. It's like intensity burns sugar. But the other thing that's really clear from that when they look at the data is that while you might burn more fat during the workout, it doesn't ensure that you burn more fat and lose fat overall during the day. Your body will make up for it unless you're in a caloric deficit.
You're no longer an advocate of fasted workouts.
Nope.
What do you personally do and what do you recommend?
If you're doing a walk or something in the morning, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about intense workouts. I'm talking about hard workouts. Now, sometimes I will be traveling and the only time I can work out is 6:30 in the morning and I woke up at 6 and I'm not eating.
Right.
So in those situations, what I do is hit a cup of coffee. Coffee is my most favorite workout tool. But I take in a big mix of creatine, essential amino acids, and electrolytes. And that's how I do it. And I figure, if you have those essential amino acids on board, then you'll be good. And I still feel like I can get a good workout in.
That's what I generally do.
For some people, hey, they might feel horrible. I had an actress I worked with for a while who was like, she just could not eat in the morning. She felt horrible when she did. And so you got to work with each person's individual biochemistry. I always say people write the diet book for them and then they think everybody should be on that. And I'm like, no, we have to be on the thing that works best for us.
Right. Well, let's talk about, sort of as we're aging, maybe in your 30s to 40s, we're in perimenopause, to 50s and beyond, and maybe in menopause. Is there any different advice for each of these stages of life?
My true focus, like I know there's a whole lot around exercising around your cycle and all of that. And I have not explored that in depth. So that's just not the area that I'm really looking at. The area that I personally prefer is when it all starts to go sideways from there on out. So that's my area, is really like, okay, 45 plus. And what I'm finding so often, and it might be 40. I've got another friend right now I'm working with who's 40 having this happen. Who knows? It could happen at 40, it could happen at 45. What I find so often with so many women is they don't realize it's perimenopause, despite all the, information. And most of them are in the health field and they just were like, oh, this couldn't be this. What I think is important with all of this, because I hear all of this conversation around don't raise cortisol and don't do this. And it's like, not the case. I don't think that we have to focus that much differently on what we're doing as long as we're listening to our body and we're monitoring, tracking. So a couple things that need to happen. Number one, I think at the age when we're teens, we should go have a DEXA scan. But boy, if you're listening to this right now, the first thing you do is go get a DEXA scan so that you can find out both how much body fat you have, but more importantly, your visceral adipose tissue, because while you might not like the fat on your thighs is not the problem. It's the fat around your organs. And you really want to watch this as you age to ensure that you are going in the right direction. You also want to look at your skeletal muscle mass and make sure that your arms and legs and trunk are even. That's another piece to that, but that you have quality muscle, that you have fillets, not ribeyes, right? One of the things that happens as we age is our muscle gets fat infiltrated and becomes more insulin resistant. The cool thing is it's the fastest place we can start to restore insulin sensitivity. And then, of course, bone mineral density. So first thing I have people do is start to track that along with their HRV and their sleep score. But that's going to help you really start to gauge how are you doing with your workouts? Because especially as you're going through all the hormonal shifts, you don't know where, like, your day 19 to 21 went out the window. So you have no idea where you are in your cycle. And you just really have to pay attention to how you feel. And maybe today needs to be a walk and not the heaviest workout you ever did. And you need to learn to listen to your body. So I'm much more into that than kind of like, again, I'm really not focused in the 30s. Everything for me is well beyond 40. But looking at what can we achieve with exercise? Because as we start to go into perimenopause and postmenopause, I say our margin for error has gone way down. And so I'm personally a big fan of hormone replacement therapy, working with a functional medicine doctor. I've been on it since the day my estrogen dropped, basically. But I'm a big fan of using the least amount of all these things you need because you're doing the right diet and lifestyle habits. And the cool thing is with exercise is you can use exercise to help your body handle stress better. As we know, as you go through all of this, your adrenals becomes the superstar that's so important. And so when we exercise, we want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that's honoring our adrenals, not trashing them. And that's where I really like to look at walking, a little intensity with walking, resistance training, and then I'll add in something like yoga class, something restorative as well, and get away from what I've seen a lot of women do in their 20s and 30s, which is loads and loads of cardio because they want to lose weight, which, as we know, actually makes you worse, not better, because it's burning up muscle and making you more catabolic and raising stress hormones if you're doing it chronically. So this type of thing can help your adrenals handle stress better. It's good for bone density. It helps with testosterone. And so that's where I start with people is let's get everything on board, right? And start to really get you aware of how your body feels and have you track your HRV so that you'll be able to see what should I do today? And you'll be able to kind of make the right decisions based on how your body is feeling.
Absolutely. I mean, I find when I've done a really heavy workout, my HRV is, lower the next day than, if I haven't done anything. at all.
Yeah.
And do you find that there is a big difference in being able to gain muscle, whether you're on bioidentical hormone replacement or not?
Oh, heck yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because I mentioned getting a DEXA. What I like people to do is get a DEXA scan and then get a bioimpedance machine. I like this brand called Oxaline Pro because it was the highest rated one and goes straight to a Bluetooth. And I combine that with a Renpho Bluetooth tape measure. And once a week, I have people do a waist and hip measurement. It goes right into their app. And every day they step on the scale to find out their bioimpedance, so their total body water that's going to protect their skeletal muscle mass and their body fat. But I have people take the average over a week and not get crazy and use this as a biometric tool, just like they'd look at HRV or they'd look at their sleep score. They would never look at their sleep score and question their self-worth like we do with the scale. So we got to get off the scale, look at what that weight is made up of, look at, are we improving? Because the challenge as we're going through all of this is like, when you start to put weight on, what is that weight? Because if you put on muscle, awesome.
Right.
If you're putting on fat, let's start to look back and go, what shifted? Did my estrogen go down? Did my thyroid go down? Did my diet change? Do we need to do a macro audit and really look at what you're eating and make sure we use a scale to weigh? Like, to me, until I have someone actually tracking their food and weighing it and tracking their steps, I'm not going to listen to the other stuff because we don't really know what the problem is, right? And then you can start to unpack with some of the other stuff. But if your estrogen's low, like we think a lot of testosterone is how we build muscle, but for women, we need estrogen to build muscle, burn fat. We need thyroid to build muscle. So if these things are down, I still remember when my thyroid dropped and my estrogen dropped because I couldn't recover. I couldn't work out like I used to. I couldn't recover. I wasn't building muscle. I'm like, what the heck? And I mean, it happened practically overnight.
It's so hard, right? Post-menopause. I mean, I occasionally do get on the Peloton and most all of the teachers are in their 20s, and I'm thinking, please, could you give me a teacher in their 50s? I don't mean, of course, there's reasons, genetics, and all kinds of reasons why people are not fit despite desperately trying in their 30s. But I'm like, wow, when I was in my 20s and 30s, it was pretty damn easy, at least for me with my diet genetics, to be fit. But like, give me somebody in their 50s, in their 60s. I mean, you are such an inspiration, looking at you in your 60s, but there's so few,
I'm actually working on changing this right now. The phone call before this interview was, we are working on creating this so that, because I joke about it, I go, back when I was a personal trainer, I was in my 20s wearing my little booty shorts, training these 45 and 50-year-old women who trying to give them advice as they were totally perimenopausal. And I'm going, I'm so sorry. Like, it was clueless. And I know for me, if I'm going to get advice from someone, I don't want advice from some 25-year-old who has never had a hot flash.
Right.
Like, no way. You've got to understand what's going on and how to work with it. Like, I just was with a girlfriend who didn't realize what was happening to her and absolutely wants to peel off unzip herself. I said, this is how I felt. Unzip herself, step out, leave, come back, in a couple of years when things have settled down.
I mean,
right?
I was still having cycles at 46 and I was the most fit I've ever been. And then, of course I had some stressors in my life but menopause hit and it was like, what's going on here?
Think of this almost like a pregnancy thing where it's going on, or maybe that other puberty, right? It's going on, you get through it. I believe like the minute you start to have those symptoms, you're optimizing thyroid, you're balancing estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, you're doing all the lifestyle stuff, like no margin for error anymore. I can't do the high stress stuff I used to get away with. My body's like, stop it. But I believe that when it settles down and you get to the other side, you can get in better shape. You just have to do it correctly. Again, the protein, the creatine, making sure that your vitamin D is optimized, fish oil, which is anabolic, doing an omega-3 and omega quant test, getting that magnesium in, doing that resistance training. And to start out with, in order to build muscle, you need to work to about what we call 2 reps in reserve. Let's say you're doing sets of 10 to 15. You should feel like when you get to 15, you could maybe eke out another 1 or 2. You're doing multiple sets. So you're monitoring this with that home bioimpedance machine to make sure that things are improving. And it's a little bit like watching grass grow, let's be honest. But what I love about resistance training is while, you are lucky if you build a pound or two of muscle a month. Everyone's like, I'm going to get big. I'm like, in your wildest dreams, there's that outlier, okay, it's not me. It's probably not you either. We might gain a pound or two a month. But we'll notice the strength changing. All of a sudden, where we were doing maybe an overhead press with 5-pound dumbbells, now we can do it with 10. Then we can do it with 15. And that changes the game, right? It changes everything. So over time, if you're doing these things, you will shift that body composition. I truly believe I'm at when I was taking this on, I go, I'm going to do this to prove a point. I'm going to be in the best shape at 60 than I've ever been in my life. I'm going to push my VO2 max. I'm going to push my weights. I'm lifting as heavier than I did when I was in my 20s. I never, I don't remember because I had to do VO2 max testing in grad school, but I don't remember where I was at. But I've been pushing those Peloton classes, which I hate, detest. I think that's what we take on. We go what would being in awesome shape at 60 or 70 look like? Because I'm doing this now because I know what I want to be able to do at 80 and 90. And if I don't train for it now, it ain't happening then, right?
I think it's the wake-up call to everybody to get out there.
I would argue they're few and far between because society has told them that's not possible.
Mm-hmm.
Again, after being at USC with these 80 and 90-year-olds, you can build muscle at 90.
Mm-hmm.
The research shows it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are you going to become a bodybuilder? I mean, maybe if we had a 90-year-old class of bodybuilders, that you could compete there, but anything is possible. And it really is, it's never too late to start. And I would also argue is if you're listening and you haven't been doing any of this stuff, you're going to see way bigger results. You see way bigger results to start. Someone who's fit, getting them fitter is way harder than taking someone who isn't fit and getting them fit.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see big changes, but you want to make sure that you're monitoring it. What you measure and monitor, you can improve. And that's where that getting on a scale every day that's giving you your bioimpedance and looking at the end of the week and going, did my body composition shift for the better? And it's such an important thing to do when your hormones are starting to shift, because then you can go, uh-oh, I'm eating the same that I've always eaten, yet I'm gradually gaining body fat. Could that be because my estrogen dumped and dropped my metabolism?
Mm-hmm.
Most likely. Am I losing muscle because I'm doing less? These things are all fixable, and that's what's super cool. Especially nowadays, now that we know what we know about the Ridiculous Women's Health Initiative, weird outcomes and what to do with hormones, you really can be in amazing shape in your 60s and 70s. And, I'm not in my 80s yet, but when I get there, I intend to be in the same thing. I'm going to be like that gymnast they have on Instagram who's 80. I'm like, look at her.
But how long did it take you to, get even more fit? Was that a year-long process? Was that several months?
First thing that I did was fall of my 59th birthday. So it was I think it was probably November 2022. We went and got DEXA scans. Now, prior to that, I took a couple months. I actually increased my calories and started lifting heavier and put on some weight. And it was a mental game. I was like, you're doing this for, I knew what I'd done, right? And I weighed in at 154 and 13.9% body fat, which was exactly what I was at 39. Now, I have been, and I always have to say this as a disclaimer, I'm an unnaturally lean woman. I have always been an unnaturally lean woman. It is my body type. Women have 10 to 15% essential fat. Men have about 3 to 5% essential fat. And, athletic, when I was in grad school, these are the norms. I know the norms have changed because they tried to make it now that you can be, have higher body fat and be healthier. It really depends where your body fat is. It really is about your skeletal muscle mass. More muscle and less visceral adipose tissue is what's healthier. But when I was in grad school, we were taught that an athletic woman would be 15 to 22%, a healthy woman, 18 to 25%. And for men, athletic males, 5 to 12%, healthy male, 10 to 18%. So my husband, 57 years old at the time, or 58, gets his DEXA, he's 25%.
Mm.
Uh-oh. And always had worked out.
And he's looks like a thin guy.
He's a skinny fat. He's a skinny fat. He is what you hear about and has always worked out, didn't push himself, and wasn't willing to track and monitor his protein until this all happened. And then I was like, oh, and that's when he got serious. And by the way, in 8 months, he dropped 27 pounds of fat and put on 24 pounds of muscle and went to 10% body fat. Because I was like, here's what you do. And he dialed it in, which was super exciting. And he also put some testosterone into the mix, which helped a ton. Like, I think that probably accounted for 50% of the gains was he got his testosterone optimized. And I always say that's super important. I walked into this with having my estrogen and testosterone and thyroid all dialed in. So I didn't have that issue. And I knew that I'd been very healthy, 10% body fat. And again, I say for most women, when I say that, your goal would probably be 18 to 20%. So disclaimer. But back in my college and graduate school days, I was lifting heavy and that's where I would sit. And so after that, I went through and I started doing caloric restriction, optimizing my protein. I actually went a little higher than 1 gram per pound of target body weight. And I went to I want to be, let's see if I can get to the 10%, 140 that I've been in, college and after. It took, my DEXA literally went from 13.9 to 12 to 12.4 to 11 to 9. And that's when I kind of went, and take it up a bit to sitting around 10 and 140, 142 pounds. But the more important thing was I'd gotten into a rut with my exercise where I was doing the same stuff. I wasn't progressing and I wasn't pushing myself really on my HIIT training at all. I was doing like lazy HIIT training. I wasn't watching my steps and I just tightened and put all that stuff in place. I started going to a really hard HIIT class where everybody in that class is like in their 20s. Literally, I could have given birth to anyone in the class, right? And you know how they say you should be in a room with people who are smarter than you? I say you should work out in a room with people who are younger and fitter than you.
Yes, for sure.
Right. And Tim and I go to this class and Tim is so competitive. We walk in there and there's sprint treadmills. Now, the average human turns out after the age of 30, only 1% of us will ever sprint again. So I bought a sprint treadmill. Now, if I can do a sprint treadmill with a knee and a hip replacement, anyone can do a sprint.
You've had a knee and a hip replacement?
Yeah, from those old injuries. I finally had to do it in my 50s. And I have a broken foot from when I was teaching dance class in Japan and landed wrong and doing acrobatics. So I have a broken foot, knee and hip, sprinting, doing mountain climbers and burpees and all this crazy stuff. And I remember the first time we walked out of that HIIT class.
Was it like an Orange Theory? What kind of class was it?
It's just called a HIIT. Well, the first one we go to, I didn't pay any attention. I go, oh, this time looks good. Tim's like, would you stop doing this? We go in. One side of the room are sprint treadmills. The other side are these stations with like kettlebells and a TRX and step benches and barbells. And you switch back and forth. So you sprint and he has you going through a series of sprints.
Wow.
And then you'll go to the other side and do like burpees and mountain climbers and kettlebell swings and snatches. And so we do this. I think I'm going to throw up. I'm literally like, we walk out of there dead. And it was like, all right, this is clearly what we need to be doing. So that got me adding a lot more power moves, snatches and burpees and mountain climb, all this stuff that I realized I just stopped doing because, again, you start to feel it. We don't move as fast as we used to. We're not running up the stairs. So I'm doing all that stuff. And that's what's really helped with the shift is forcing that power in because building muscle tends to be what you can do for, anywhere from 6 to 30 reps, multiple sets, almost to failure, but not quite. Building strength is what you can do, the heaviest thing you can lift one time. So it tends to be really short sets, super heavy. And building power is how fast you can do it. And so you really got to incorporate all of those. And there actually is a type of resistance training called high velocity resistance training where you might do, 6 pull-ups as fast as you possibly can. And that would build your strength and power. Or, squat jumps, that type of stuff. So like today at the gym, I did squat jumps. I did side lunges that involve some jumping. I did medicine ball, like wood chops. I'm doing stuff with as much power in it as possible and speed in it as possible, because that is the big thing that we tend to lose as we age.
And so for listeners, how does somebody find a trainer that, I guess, sort of feels the same way you do or views things? Because trainers, as you know, it's like a dietitian could be coming at it from so many different ways. So
Right.
I guess maybe is there a type of trainer, like functional trainer? And again, it's like functional medicine. Everybody's kind of using that. Or what are maybe a couple of questions that our listeners could use to identify a trainer who's going to train them like you're recommending?
I know this is it's why I'm working on the next level in my project, so that I have a way to help people have a powerful aging blueprint and then be able to show their trainer and have trainers trained in it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, my favorite person who's working on this is Deborah Atkinson.
Oh.
Yes. So she has her brand is Flipping 50, and it's all focused on how to do this. And she's actually trained coaches on this as well.
Okay.
But it really would be, when you're working with a trainer, you want them to look at your DEXA scan, be able to look at that and go, all right, what are our goals based on this? Because for most people, they think they need to lose body fat, but quite often, if they focused on putting on muscle and incorporating in that activity, the body fat would take care of itself, right? If you dial in your eating and you dial in your exercise, a lot of the body fat stuff is not the issue, but you don't want to lose body fat while losing muscle. You want to make sure you're holding on to or building muscle. So you go to the trainer and say, let's do a VO2 max test. You can do it through a lab, or you can do it. By the way, DEXAFit's now going to be doing a predicted VO2 max test where you're getting a DEXA scan and they can predict your VO2 max as well. It's coming out. But you can also do it on a treadmill, a predicted one. So I'd love to see a trainer that looks at some basic strength metrics, like maybe a flexed arm hang or a push-up test or a grip strength test, along with a VO2 max. And then is looking at what do we need to do to design a program to improve this. There's one other metric that needs to be in there, and that's balance, because as we age, we lose balance, stability, flexibility. It's why I use a TRX machine at home and really work through full ranges of motion, like a full squat, a full single-legged squat, which when you've had a knee and hip replacement, it's its own set of hard. But if you just did this, stand up on one foot, cross your arms, and close your eyes and see how long you can stay there. That's another one, because you also want a trainer that's going to be incorporating in not just the power moves, how fast, and the strength moves, but also how do we put in some balance in there as well.
Mm-hmm. And a DEXA scan, where can people get a DEXA scan?
I am really loving this company. I was speaking at an event, and this company was there, DEXAFit, and they are really working on getting these franchise locations all across the country. And the reason I like DEXAFit is they have a really great printout that helps you understand what's going on. And they are working on a predicted VO2 max from the DEXA scan, because to do a true VO2 max, generally you'll have to go to a lab.
Mm-hmm.
You have to wear this horrible tight mask. It's a really awful, not fun thing. So I've avoided doing it, even though it's the most important predictor. I was like, when I heard this, I'm like, oh, that's perfect. And actually, they're working on some things that might even have it be that you can go to the DEXA, do your cardio scan, your whole body scan, and your VO2 max, which would be amazing. So look up DEXA, but DEXAFit's kind of the brand, but DEXA itself, there's a gym in Tampa that has a DEXA scanner in there.
Yeah, there are a lot of gyms that, do have them. And you may not know the answer to this question, because I don't think you've lived at altitude, but, I live at 7,500 feet. So do you know how altitude affects, all of this?
I would just think that you could come down
and do my VO2 max down instead of up.
Down to your VO2 max, crush it.
I don't know.
I mean, I would think that being able to train in altitude is going to have you in so much better shape. I get up in altitude and die, So it just kills me. So, I mean, you have an unfair advantage in how you can train if you're up there enough. The challenge I had when I lived in altitude is I was in altitude 3 weeks, and then I would leave for a week and I'd lose it, come back up and have to get it back. And then by the time I had it back, I'd leave again. So, the only, I would just do my DEXA I would do my DEXA at sea level. It's probably a little bit of a cheat, but
Right.
there it is. You also want to do a DEXA or I'm sorry, not a DEXA. I do my VO2 max at sea level if you have to do the real hard one.
Yeah. I mean, people do ask, oh, do you feel amazing when when you're in Austin? Do you feel like you could just conquer the world? I don't honestly notice a difference going back and forth, but where I notice a difference is in my sleep and in my HRV. And so my HRV is always better in Austin and I sleep better in Austin. But other than
once you acclimate to the altitude, it doesn't improve.
There's so many variables. We don't have central air and heat. And so in Austin we do. And even though it can be hot, it's a constant temperature. Whereas here, I rarely put on, we have what are called mini splits, but I very rarely put them on. So, you go to bed and it's warmer and then it cools down. I just think there's so many different variables. It's hard to tell. I don't think it's 100% the altitude, but I don't really feel any difference. But, the interesting thing is I tend to not exercise as much when I'm in Austin because I'm generally there working long days. And so, I don't have that necessarily to compare to, or the exercise that I'm doing is different. It's more walking and not, doing the heavy weights and things.
Well, what you could do in Austin is some exercise snacks. I was talking about this the other day to a group and they got very excited because they thought that I meant eat while you exercise. I'm like, that is not what I'm talking about. Whereas in Austin, maybe you have a rucking vest there. You make sure you get a walk or two in, and then you throw in some exercise snacks. So maybe you have the Exciser mini stepper where you could do some overhead press and pull Exciser bursts. And then maybe you do like a little air squat push up round. And you could do just some things each day where you accumulate a couple exercise snacks throughout the day.
Yeah.
Be huge.
What I like to ask our guests is 3 recommendations that you have for our listeners that they can start today to take back their health.
3 recommendations. Okay, here we go. Number 1, protein. And so I have a protein calculator because there's a range that you can eat in, and a 1-week protein challenge that just gets you focused on eating protein first. That is at jjvirgin.com/protein first. Number 2, start with just tracking those steps and getting that 8 to 12,000. Like start there. If you're there already, let's push the intensity. And if you're there already, I also have on YouTube, I don't know the link, however, I did a how to get started on resistance training routine with a cheat sheet on it. So we can include that. And then number 3, get that DEXA scan. I would love, in my perfect world, a DEXA scan would be done every year. And then when you're really, once you get 50 plus, you'd be doing it twice a year to make sure that you are holding on to and building muscle, right? And then correlate it with that scale at home so that you're able to track as you go. Super important. Those would be my easiest recommendations to get started.
I find it very informative, the impedance scales. You feel like they're pretty accurate?
No, they're not.
Okay. But it's accurate enough because you have a baseline in your,
Right. Is the HRV really accurate? I was talking to Molly Maloof because I'm like, my HRV sucks. She goes, get the Polar. It's too far away from you. What matters is you're looking at the relative change. And so with the bioimpedance machine, I have a $5,000 bioimpedance machine at home. It is not the same as the DEXA. However, it's the one I can see every day. So whatever you're looking at, you're looking for the relative change, right? And if it's going in the right direction. And what's important, like over the pandemic, I was getting on the scale every day and my weight started to go up a pound every single day.
Oh my God.
Autoimmune disease, like I have an autoimmune thing. It was trigger kicked in, bam. And thank God I was stepping on the scale every day because what were we wearing during the pandemic? Like athleisure. I never would have known until I couldn't have fixed it in time. So, or as early. So you want to be managing these things because this is not like shameful. This is, if we see your weight go up, we have to go, and it's not muscle, it's fat. We have to go, is it estrogen? Is it thyroid? Is it testosterone? Is it what you're eating? Is it a food intolerance? What is going on so that we can fix it? It's all information. right? And so all you're looking at is the relative differences, and then you correlate it to the DEXA. I know how different the DEXA is, the percentage points, and I just correlate it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so true, particularly as you're building muscle, just that idea that, the scale could be either not going down or could be going up. And then, I think if your point is to build muscle and you see that on this, in bioimpedance scale, then, hopefully it gives you joy and happiness and, a feeling of success and pride versus freaking out. And not knowing is, the scary part.
It is. And we don't do well. Women have a little body dysmorphia, me included, where you can have all the signs, like I'm stronger at the gym, my clothes are looser, and yet the scale goes up and you're like, oh my gosh,
Right.
Stop it.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. Well, you've already mentioned where they can go get the free guide. How else can our listeners find you?
Everything is at jjvirgin.com. That's my Well Beyond 40. I hope we have a time scheduled for you to come back on the show.
Love to.
Yes. So YouTube, I'm really focusing on YouTube now. So YouTube and my Well Beyond 40 podcast and Instagram are all my places I've been hanging out a lot.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, JJ. Great to see you as always. And congratulations on all your success.
Thank you. Congratulations on this podcast. Looking forward to sharing it.
Awesome. Thanks. I want to thank this week's guests for sharing their time and knowledge. And thank you for listening. To read the full show notes for each episode, which include a summary, timestamp, quotes, and any resources mentioned, please visit amymyersmd.com/podcast. Lastly, if you've enjoyed this episode, I'd love if you would leave a rating and a review on Apple or Spotify, and we'll select a few to read out loud in a future episode. Tune in next week to hear from another inspiring guest as we help you take back your health.